Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
Welcome back to the Prepped and Polished podcast. It's episode 231. Make sure to find Prepped and Polished on all your social media channels. We're on YouTube, SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just type Prepped and Polished. Go to our site, preppedandpolished.com, if you have tutoring questions. Or you can call us 781-753-9951. On today's episode 231, I speak to Jessie Peck Martin. And Jessie has a master's from Lehigh in education. She's the founder of compassU Educational Consulting and author of 3 Things About College Admissions I Wish Someone Had Told Me, creator of College Admissions Made Simple Virtual Academy. She's an IECA member. She visits 20 colleges and schools annually, and she stays up to date and meets with admissions officers and colleagues and attends national conventions. She has 4 children. 2 are college graduates, one from University of Chicago, one from Lehigh, 2 in high school. And on today's episode, Jessie will teach you how to make the most of the college admissions process during quarantine. For another related episode, make sure just to listen to episode 230, where we talk about how to self-study for the SAT and ACT tests during quarantine. To work with Jessie, check out jessiepeckmartin.com. And also, Jessie was kind enough to give us a special coupon code for our listeners to access 2 courses she currently has launched at a discounted rate. The 2 courses are, 1, make the most of the virtual college admissions, and another one is called Take Back the Summer. Check out the show notes for the coupon and the link to her courses. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I got a lot out of it. So that means that you're going to get a lot out of it too. Enjoy it. Jessie Peck Martin, thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Alexis? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and how your background helped you become where you are today as a nationally recognized college consultant?
Well, it was 26 years ago this coming Wednesday that I was in a hospital bed holding my firstborn, and
Yes.
and I was looking at this tiny being going, wow, what a responsibility to help this person realize their full potential. Fast forward, nearly 20 years later, and I had 4 children, and I was also deeply involved in taking care of my 100-year-old grandmother, as well as managing some projects for educational publishers when we were expecting to hear back from our son's early decision at that point to the University of Pennsylvania. He was a senior in high school, highly accomplished, had all the aforementioned stats that you needed, and he received his first rejection. And so amidst all of that and coming to say, hey, Mom really needs to see your essays now. I've respected your independence all along. You've been working closely with your counselor at school. It was at a highly regarded prep school at the time. And I realized that we had really missed the boat in helping him really show himself authentically in his applications and come at it from a place of empowerment as opposed to fear. He really came across as sort of arrogant in his applications, and that was just a reaction to his fear of the process, right? Because here they are facing the most competitive college that they've faced all along. So, we helped him through the process. He landed very well, but it was a really tumultuous time, and there were things that I recognized that we really missed that would have helped him along the way and helped us as parents, help him really realize that he had an incredible amount to offer. It wasn't just about where he was going to get in. That led me, it seemed as if everything that I had done to that point as an educator, as a teacher, as a writer, as an editor, as a project manager, working for educational publishers, all sort of rolled up into one. And I realized that this was the work that I was meant to do all along. So I ended up launching my practice about a year and a half after that, and have never looked back.
Excellent. Can you tell our audience about your site, jessiepeckmartin.com, and what will we find there?
So at jessiepeckmartin.com, you'll find I have an active blog, and I have all the information about what it means to work with my firm, compassU Educational Consulting. I also recently launched a virtual academy called College Admissions Made Simple. I have a Facebook page called College Admissions Made Simple. It's a private Facebook group, and the virtual academy that's sort of been my project while we've been social distancing this spring, has been to launch courses so that parents and students can get the help that they need at this time that's incredibly unprecedented, because we're having to do the college admissions process in a very different way with social distancing at this point.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so the college admission process is really daunting, and even before quarantine.
Right.
How daunting is the process now, and who is more stressed, the parents, the students, or both?
The parents and the students are both both incredibly stressed. I think that, I think that there's been this real shift in terms of how do we go about finding that right fit when we can't get on campus, when we can't interface with those people that we're used to interfacing with. We're used to being on campus and being able to go try out the food in the dining hall and be able to walk around the campus and sort of have these spontaneous conversations with tour guides, spontaneous conversations with students on campus once that official tour is over. And that is completely off. There's none of that at this point. And so what's happening is people are they're getting very stuck, and they're sort of, there's a lot of people that are saying, well, I guess I'll just wait until things open up again. And that to me is just adding to the stress. So one of the online courses that I've created is called Make the Most of a Virtual College Admissions Event, because it's a very different thing how to make that useful, get the information that you need, and make the good impression that you want to make in that much sort of distilled time, right? You only have 20 to 30 minutes to do that in a virtual event. So.
Wow. We'll get into that, I'm sure, a little later. But so you mentioned that taking a step back from the swirl of uncertainty is the best thing you can do for your students' admissions journey. Why is that important?
So it's typically really stressful, and now it's sort of double stressful because we've got the pandemic, and we have a lot of uncertainty and systemic racism that we're approaching right now in the country, right? So there's all of this business that's going on that's valid, right? There's nothing invalid about it. So what happens is I find, especially with teenagers and with families, they start the process in the exact wrong way. And I made these mistakes. This is part of the reason why I got into this work, was that, they start with the statistics and where am I going to go and what's the brand name and who's going there. And they're talking on the sidelines at the soccer field or at a bar, a neighborhood barbecue. And they're starting with all of these data points that actually have very little to do with who their student is. So taking a step back and starting on the inside is really, really important. What is it that your student is really curious about? What type of learning environment do they thrive in? Where is it that they feel like they get into flow, that state of flow where you're completely engaged in an activity and you're losing track of time. So taking stock of all of those sort of internal markers that say, hey, this is where I'm finding my passion. This is where I'm finding my purpose. We live in our educational model by and large is a syllabus. it's a syllabus generation. So students are used to being rewarded for coming up with the right answer. They're not necessarily rewarded for asking the questions that they're really curious about. And this process done well, because on the other end, when they launch from college and they go out into the work world, you've got to be able to pivot and handle setbacks and really dive into the things that you're interested in, because that's the economy of the future. It's no longer, we're going to get one job and we're going to stay in that job for 20 years. And we're going to move up the ladder. That's not how it works anymore. So you really have to be motivated intrinsically in order for that to go as best as it can.
Yeah, that reminds me a little bit about a conversation we had with Frank Bruni. Before he blew up, and it's impossible to call him. But he talked a lot about it in that book about, it's not the brand name of the college that's important. It's what you do while you're in a school. Take advantage of talking to professors and just kind of, it's like what you're saying, like digging inside and looking from within. And then when you get out in the real world, it's important the connections you make and the internships that you pursue and things like that.
Absolutely. And what might be an incredible school for one student is not the right fit for another, even if it's an amazing brand name, right? Like, even if it's a name that everybody has heard of and it has an incredible reputation, it just may not be the right school for that student.
Absolutely.
Really important.
Yeah, like one of your daughters, I believe, goes to U Chicago or went, right? And that's not for everyone.
That is not for everyone. It was actually my oldest son, the one who was denied from University of Pennsylvania. Okay. He graduated with a physics degree. He has a Welsh name, Bryn, so but it's spelled Bryn with one N. And University of Chicago was not for everyone, but it was a very good fit for him. He is quirky and intellectual, and would just as soon come to the breakfast table with someone's dissertation and have that conversation and talk about economics in terms that we're not really sure what he's saying. So that was a really good fit for him. But as I said before, we should have started the process with him on the inside, rather than him going, well, this is a good name, and this is a good name, and this is where I need to go because of those reasons.
Absolutely.
And so there were some missed opportunities there. We made up for lost time, but I certainly would have been happy to avoid that fire drill in December of his senior year.
Absolutely. So you practice 3 tenets to live and apply at your college admissions practice. We probably covered a few of those, but can you share those 3 tenets?
Absolutely. So the 3 tenets are this. Step 1, start on the inside. And I'll go into some examples of what that means once I get through the 3 tenets. So 1 is start on the inside. 2 is choose excellence over perfection. And 3 is to be proactive, right?
Okay.
I find that when I remind students of this, and when I remind myself of these tenets, everything just becomes so much clearer, right?
Yeah.
So if we start on the inside, in terms of, if you're looking at it through the lens of college admissions and how are you going to help your student land well and land at that right fit school, right? You want to start with their unique self, their hopes, their dreams, what they're intrinsically curious about. And they need to define that success for where they're going to thrive, rather than what someone else is going to think of their acceptance or rejection, right? And that's really hard to do in our sort of brand consumer-oriented society. And they'll know, like, your anxiety will let you know if you're feeling like, your anxiety will let you know if you start going outside in instead of inside out. The second tenet, choose excellence over perfection. We are, as I mentioned before, our school system, our educational system is really set up to reward students for having the right answers. That that's a perfection oriented mindset, as opposed to that growth, curious, I want to take risks. I want to go out there and figure out something that I'm interested in learning about. And so it's really important. I mean, I remember when our youngest, she was in third grade, and she brought home this report card. I wrote a whole blog about it, and she was just devastated because she had missed an A in one class by a half a tenth of a point. And I was like, okay, whoa. You know, so sometimes that anxiety and that need, that perfection, it really, it shows up in unexpected places, and it really thwarts their ability to shine and really bring their unique selves to the table. And the last piece, which is the piece that I find most people get stuck on, is to be proactive. So there's, waiting for things to happen means nothing is going to happen, right? And I'm finding this, especially now with the clients that I'm working with amidst social distancing and COVID, they're really reluctant. Well, we're just going to wait, right? We're just going to wait and see what happens. And I'm like, well, that's not a great plan. It's not going to get you where you want to go. We can acknowledge the pain, we can acknowledge the disappointment that you're feeling, but hey, let's take your energy, and instead of sort of just being stuck, let's get unstuck in another way.
Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah.
Those are great. So since COVID has gone ahead, cancel many plans, if you're a high school student, how specifically can you take back the summer and maximize it despite what's going on?
Well, there are so many opportunities out there for students to just really take this time and use it, right? Because time is an opportunity in and of itself. And so one of the things that I'm doing with the one-on-one clients that I'm working with, whether they be a rising 9th grader or whether they be a rising 12th grader, right, is to create a small summer project that was, abides by whatever social distancing guidelines your state is using, because so many internships and camps and other experiences have been canceled. Yes. So the second online course that I launched is called Take Back Summer 2020, and it uses the same exact framework that I'm using with the one-on-one clients I work with to take help the student take an inventory of everything that they're interested in, or maybe something that they would like to explore, and then how can we sort of pivot that and parlay that into a small summer project. Could be 2 days, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a 2-month project, so that you can really turn it into a resume boost, and maximize your space on your activity descriptions and on your resume, and really gain some experience. I have one student who was like, okay, I'm really interested in politics, so I'm going to start a junto, which is the Ben Franklin dinner society talk group. And so once a week he gets on a Zoom call with a couple of his friends from high school, and they talk about an article or a podcast that they have listened to on politics over the last week, and they discuss it.
Love it.
Right. I have another student who hadn't had the time. She's a dedicated athlete. She really hadn't had the time until COVID. She always loved to draw when she was younger. And I said, so she's like, but I'm really nervous to put myself out there. So she gave herself a challenge to do a 100-day Instagram. I'm just going to sketch something, and I'm going to post it on Instagram every day for 100 days. Like, wow. These are sort of smaller projects, right? However, they provide some structure, they provide some purpose, and they help the student get unstuck. Oh, And then the bonus is that they've done something really positive with their time. If another student that started a small business running errands for the seniors in her community, right? Going to the grocery store, picking up their milk, picking up their coffee, because they don't want to go out and be exposed in the grocery store. So one day a week, she has her driver's license, she gets in her car, she goes.
That's awesome.
She's got 3 seniors in her community, and she runs their errands for them. So they're just really cool, right? And I think that there's oftentimes that students feel like, oh my goodness, I have to be enrolled in something in order for it to be legitimate and valid. And I had a student a few years ago, and he was an introvert, didn't really like to go out, didn't really like to do a whole bunch, but he was an avid reader. He read at least 2 titles a week. And I said, he's like, so I don't really have many activities in my activity description. So how is that going to play on my application? And so we just started talking about, you can tell the books behind me in my office. I'm an avid reader as well.
Yeah,
I said to him, can you make a list of all the books you've read just in the last 12 months? And it was like it was a sizable list. And I said, so we're going to put that as an activity description on your Common App. And then we're going to list that. We're going to list all of those titles in your additional information section of your Common App. So those types of things, like there's all sorts of missing pieces that of the way that teens are spending their time that really give them a boost on their applications and really help form their application pitch, which is something that we haven't talked about yet today. So
those are amazing examples, and it's clearly just what you practice, the importance of being proactive, and also the importance of doing it daily, like kind of like the drawing. So you build that positive momentum and create something out of it. So the kid's weekly political Zoom talk, I'm sure he loves doing it.
Right.
So,
and it provides something else for your mind to ruminate on.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
right, because that inner speak will often, right, that self-doubt will creep in if you're one of my favorite books is Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And he's got this thing in basically garbage in, garbage out. And so if you're just putting a little positive things in, I mean, there's so many ways now. You don't have to sit and read a book to read a book. You can listen on a podcast. You've got Audible. You've got documentaries on Netflix. You can read a newspaper article on your phone.
Absolutely.
There's really there's no limit to the information that's out there.
And there's just a lot of, I know there's a lot of negative cachet with what's, with all the information and political opinions going on in Facebook groups. But there's a lot of positive stuff out there too. It's what you're reminding us of. Just a lot of books, a lot of audio books, this is a great time to live in. Yeah.
Because you've got all of this at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Literally, if you have access to the technology, if you have access to the internet, if you're fortunate enough to have those, to have those technologies and subscriptions.
Yeah.
Really, there's not a whole lot of an excuse. I do think that this particular admissions cycle this year and next year, and I've heard this. I'm a member of IECA. I'm a member of, which is Independent Educational Consultants Association. I'm also a member of National Association of College Admissions Counselors. And what we're hearing from admissions officers on calls that we are having, because we're doing a lot of, typically we visit a lot of schools.
Yes.
Typically as counselors, we spend a lot of time on the road. We're visiting with schools. We're interacting with admissions folks all the time so that we can be better informed for our clients. And so now we're doing all of that via Zoom as best we can. But what we're hearing from admissions folks is, hey, listen, it's gonna be a bit easier to sort of figure out who those self-starters are and who those proactive teens are, than it has been in past years. It's gonna be, right? It's gonna come across like if you've taken the last 6 months and you haven't done anything, well, what does that, and there's very good reasons for some students who are in really difficult situations to not do anything. But there's also a lot of students who are, they're at home, they have access to the internet, and they're still not doing anything. Well, why is that, and how can we help them pivot and get unstuck and get unparalyzed, right?
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Can you tell us just a little bit about these virtual college admission events? Are they pretty good? How can you make the most of them?
So, as with anything, they vary from school to school. The schools are really learning how can we continue to interact with our prospective students and our prospective families and give them the information that they need, right? So with everybody's on a learning curve.
Yeah.
How can students make the most of a virtual college admissions event? Well, often they really don't know how to do that, right? Organically, you used to be able to get on campus, walk around, kind of look at the statues, talk to the kids, pretend that your parents weren't there, make them walk 20 feet behind you. Oh, I know all about it, right? I have 4 kids of my own. And, go to the dining hall. And so there was just more time for whatever they're interested in, or whatever kind of vibe that they're getting from a campus. There was more time for them to organically come up with, well, what am I interested in here on this campus, and what kind of questions do I need to ask? So with the students that I'm working with, and all of my students that I'm working with have taken the online course I've put together called Make the Most of a Virtual College Admissions Event. Takes about an hour all in. It's got video tutorials and downloadable worksheets. But my point was the first online course I created, because I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to help the students, the students this year get the same results and have a similar experience as students I've worked with in the past. And if they can't get on campus, how can we make the most of that? The prep work is really important. How do you do prep work and not have it take a couple of hours? Like 15 minutes of prep work online on a college website can really set a student up really nicely. Okay, but first, we go back to those 3 tenets. I have them start on the inside. Well, what's your application pitch? What are you interested in? How are we going to help you position yourself in your application? And then take those interests and skill sets and things that you have. So let's say you want to play club field hockey, and you're really interested in studying Spanish and economics, and you were in DECA, you were in the business club in high school, or you are in the business club in high school. So how can we take those interests and then very targeted go onto a college's website and find out specific programs that they offer, clubs that are offered, and then use that to help you learn a little bit more about the school, and make sure you write down 3 questions that you can ask, right? And so how do we do that? So that's just one of the lessons in the online course. It's like, hey, you've got your pitch, you kind of know what you're interested in, you've done a little bit of research. Now let's take that, and I'm gonna take you step by step to write 3 questions that are really personalized to you. And then, because then you're going to get the information that you need. Oh, and you're going to show that you've done your homework. And you're going to show that you just haven't, sort of rolled in, hopefully not wearing, still pajamas, not okay. Putting your phone on your desk so that they're looking up your nostrils, not okay.
Absolutely.
And then how do you And then specifically, hey, listen, you've got 24 hours. You've got a 24-hour window once that Zoom call or whatever platform they're using is over to write a short, sweet email, thank you email, that details something that the speaker has said about the institution, and then ask a question to start that conversation with them. That changes everything in terms of how you present yourself to that admissions officer. It changes everything, right? And all it was a very little tiny shifts about how we approach the event, how we show up at the event, and how we follow up. And guess what? That's business life. So once you're in college and you're looking for those internships, because it's not just theory anymore, right? It's theory and practice. We've got to learn, and we've got to do internships or apprenticeships or externships, because the point is to go on and be gainfully employed. Hopefully our kids will start paying their own cell phone bills at some point.
Let's hope.
Let's hope. I don't know.
I'm still trying.
My 26 and 23-year-old are back in the house, and I'm like, oh, good golly, how did this happen?
Oh man, full circle.
Yep.
But also to add to that, like, if it's helpful to get dressed up to these things, to step it up, not be in your PJs. It just makes you feel like you're just taking it kind of seriously. So it's good for you too, the student.
Absolutely. And it's a matter of, right? I think there's a lot of fear triggers when it comes to all of this, right? I'm moving out of the house. My parents are kind of afraid that, if this is the first time they've been out of the house, like that's a fear trigger. Then there's the money fear trigger, because wow, how are we going to find the right financial fit for us? Is it really going to cost $75,000 a year or $68,000 a year, or other sort of crazy monopoly money prices? And where am I going to fit academically? So they're thinking, like, you're in the test prep business, right? Like those scores, those kids swap those scores continually, and you'd have to that's just one piece. And as much as I say to them, listen, this is one piece of your application, they still put in an inordinate amount of pressure on themselves with that data point.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah.
So any advice for teens today getting ready for college and young adulthood?
I think the most important thing is for them to recognize that they've come here to this planet to do something really useful. They are unique. Their work is just getting started, and they have a lot to offer. They have just so much to offer. And what happens is sometimes that the fear of where they're going to get in really sort of overshadows and makes them feel small. And what we really need to do as educators and as people that are working with youth is to do whatever we can to help them recognize that they need to take that power back. Stop giving it away to scores. Stop giving it away to acceptances. Take that power back and go out there and do something with it. Because there's so many opportunities out there. We have an incredible higher education system in this country. There's a place for everybody, and they can do really well there. But it's up to them, right? It's really up to them. It's about them showing up every day for themselves. And so in terms of admissions, right, we're going to do everything we can to help them. Hey, start on the inside, show up, do your most excellent work, just do your best, and then be proactive. And sometimes things are going to work out, and sometimes things are not. And apparently one of my dogs just let themselves.
I was hoping it would nudge in there. I was looking at a little nose, and
yeah. So That's the 13-year-old. It's the 2-year-old crazy one that we're not sure we want to invite into the room.
Okay, we'll hold off until the next podcast.
Yeah.
Well, Jessie, thanks a lot for coming on today and spending time with us. Really got a lot out of it.
Okay, great. And I've set up for your listeners a special discount, a coupon
Wonderful.
code for the 2 online classes that are available right now. As we said, make the most of a virtual college admissions event and take back summer 2020. I think you said that was going to be in the show notes. So for
Yes.
if they enter that coupon code Prepped and Polished, they'll get access to the courses for $49 as opposed to $129. So that's a real bargain.
That's awesome.
And then if they sign up for on the College Admissions Made Simple, they sign up for the Virtual Academy. All of the courses that I've got coming out next, Finding That Fit, It's a 3-Ring Circus, and Your Application Pitch are coming out. And those are going to be courses that are less directed at just the student. Those are going to be courses that are for both the parent and the student. So there'll be worksheets, little bit of worksheet for the parent, little bit of worksheet for the student, and let's come together and have those sometimes really hard conversations, right? Because it's hard to talk to your teens sometimes about this big stuff. There's a lot wrapped up in it. So
Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
Not anymore with your courses. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's been a lot of fun, and thank you so much for having me on, Alexis, and thanks for all of the work that you do at Prepped and Polished, because you've got some wonderful resources out there, on your podcast. So
Yeah, definitely. Great. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed episode number 231 with Jessie Peck Martin. For another related episode, make sure to listen to episode 230, How to Self-Study for the SAT and ACT test during quarantine. Tune in soon to hear our next podcast. It'll be 232, our next tutoring tips episode. To access today's episode number 231 and all of our podcast episodes, go to preppedandpolished.com/podcast. And remember to work with Jessie. Go to jessiepeckmartin.com, JESSIEPECKMARTIN.com, and check the show notes for a special coupon to access your courses. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.